4. Christianity and the family. When Christianity entered into this Roman world, its impact was primarily as a people rather than as an institution. The Church, for at least the first century of the Christian era, was apparently without property, meeting, as the New Testament states, in homes. It was not an institution, but a Christian people whom Rome encountered in terms of the context of their daily lives. The Church met in homes, and families were the basic Christian institution. In early Greek and Roman cultures, paternal power was religious power, a power continuous with all being and essentially divine, requiring duties of the father and conferring him with authority. The father, as Fustel de Coulanges has shown in The Ancient City, was under law, but it must be added, he was not only under law, but also a part of that law and continuous with it in the chain of being. He was thus, to a degree, the law incarnate, in that he possessed a measure of the ultimate law in his person. This manifestation of law moved steadily from the father to the state, so that the state, originally the creature of the family and of the fathers, made itself the father and the source of law, with the family turned into its creature. Progressively, as man became a creature of the state, the family lost its meaning and its status. Meaning was now statist, not familistic, and hence the family as an institution was especially prone to atomistic and eroding influences. Zimmermann has analysed Roman life in the 2nd century AD as reflected in The Attic Nights of Aulus Gellius, AD 117 to 180. According to Zimmermann, the family conditions reflected are these. 1. Considering its attendant annoyances, marriage and rearing a family is exceedingly difficult, and only the religious or strong-minded man has the fortitude necessary to do so. Book 1:6, 2:23. 2. Family virtue among the upper and middle classes is such that, in a book for children, he can speak most casually of Demosthenes and Lais, and states that the reason Demosthenes did not have an affair with the courtesan was either price, 10,000 drachmas, or disease, regret, Book 1:8, 2:23, 5:11, 10:23. 3. Children are judging the reasonableness of a parental request or command in a frame of reference in which obedience is purely the individual prerogative of knowledge, Book 2:7. 4. The Augustinian laws on having children are Ancient History, Book 2:15, 16:10. 5. The general use of the plural of child, children, is amusing, Book 2:13, 4:2, 13:23. 6. Trust in friends and relatives is idle and vain, Book 2:29. 7. Divorce is laughable and not to be taken seriously, Book 3:2, 4:3. 8. Sexual abnormalities are the subject of everyday conversation. Hermaphrodites, once prodigies, are now instruments of pleasure, Book 3:5, 4:1, 9:4, 16:7. See also Juvenal and Martial on perversions. 9. The Vestal Virgin and the wealthy prostitute are both successful persons, but in different professions, Book 7:7, 9:5. 10. The sex life and morals of early Roman and Greek public characters must be shown at their worst, Book 7, 8 and 9, 10:6, 11:9, 27:18, 15:14, 12:12. The good is unusual, Book 15:12. 11. The practices of abortion, having children nursed and reared by slaves, and general neglect of children by parents were common. The use of wet nurses from the ranks of slaves and the servile classes had become a disease hazard. Popular conception held that Nature gave woman nipples as a kind of beauty spot. Book 2:1. 12. The avenging of kin murder, even by relatives of the first degree, parent-child, was an unusual crime and could be excused only in severe cases and by fiction. Kin no longer had meaning. Book 7:7 and 8, 13:3. 13. The problem of dissipation of the idle upper-class youth is still prominent. Book 15:11. At first glance, Zimmerman's analysis seems grossly overdrawn and unfair to Aulus Gellius. A far stronger case could be made by the use of Juvenal, Martial, Catullus, and others. Why this use of the kindly and inoffensive Aulus Gellius? Gellius was not always in agreement with what he reported. He believed himself to be a good man and a worthy citizen. But it is precisely because Gellius reflected Roman dignity and character that the world he echoes appears more deadly than the worlds of Catullus. There are no real commitments in Gellius, no basic faith. The basic issues of life are barely touched on by Gellius, and then only casually. The question of fate versus free will is reported with the same detached curiosity as are items of popular gossip. Basically, Gellius was in agreement with Chrysippus on providence that our perspective must be dialectical. Good and evil require one another, for good could not exist if there were no evil. For, according to Chrysippus, since good is the opposite of evil, it necessarily follows that both must exist in opposition to each other, supported, as it were, by mutual adverse forces, since, as a matter of fact, no opposite is conceivable without something to oppose it. This means that good and evil are not ethical facts, moral acts of obedience or disobedience to God, but rather, like God, metaphysical facts, varying aspects of being and necessary phases of life. And to make evil a metaphysically ultimate fact is, in a very real sense, to justify it. It is not surprising that a moral imperative is lacking in the kindly Gellius. Gellius's real concern lies in two other directions. First, there is an antiquarian interest in the past and a gossipy report of Roman and other customs. Two examples of this can be cited as indicative both of Gellius's charm as a writer and his lack of concern in his reporting. Those who have written about the life and civilization of the Roman people say that the women of Rome and Latium lived an abstemious life. That is, they abstained altogether from wine, which, in the early language, was called tamatum. That is, it was an established custom for them to kiss their kinsfolk for the purpose of detection, so that, if they had been drinking, the odour might betray them. But they say that the women were accustomed to drink the second brewing, raisin wine, spiced wine, flavoured with myrrhed, and other sweet-tasting drinks of that kind. And these things are indeed made known in those books which I have mentioned, but Marcus Cato declares that women were not only censured, but also punished by a judge no less severely if they had drunk wine than if they had disgraced themselves by adultery. I have copied Marcus Cato's words from the oration entitled On the Dowry, in which it is also stated that husbands had the right to kill wives taken in adultery. When a husband puts away his wife, says he judges the woman as a censor would, and has full powers if she has been guilty of any wrong or shameful act. She is severely punished if she has drunk wine. If she has done wrong with another man, she is condemned to death. Further, as to the right to put her to death, it was thus written, If you should take your wife in adultery, you may with impunity put her to death without a trial, but if you should commit adultery or indecency, she must not presume to lay a finger on you, nor does the law allow it. Gellius is genuinely fond of the old Romans and proud of them. Nevertheless, his interest is antiquarian, and at points humorous. The picture of the wives of old Romans drinking heavily spiced wine to cover the smell of alcohol is clearly amusing. Human foibles rather than moral questions appeal to Gellius. His report about the strange suicides of the maids of Miletus is again indicative of this. Plutarch, in the first book of his work on the soul, discussing disorders which affect the human mind, has told us that almost all the maidens of the Milesian nation suddenly, without any apparent cause, conceived a desire to die, and thereupon many of them hanged themselves. When this happened more frequently every day, and no remedy had any effect on their resolve to die, the Milesians passed a decree that all those maidens who committed suicide by hanging should be carried to the grave naked, along with the same rope by which they had destroyed themselves. After that decree, the maidens ceased to seek a voluntary death, deterred by the mere shame of so disgraceful a burial. This is Gellius, a kindly, curious observer who views virtue with friendly eyes and a ready humour, and vice with a kindly awareness that it is a condition of life. Because good and evil are metaphysically ultimate for him, a crusade against evil is an exercise in futility. In this perspective, it is inevitable that social ethics becomes a matter of poise and manners rather than good and evil. Second, when religion wanes, words lose their basic context of meaning, which is theological, and semantics takes over in a futile attempt to provide meaning. It is not surprising that Gellius is more interested in the meaning of words than in morality. The basis of community and communication is a common world of faith and meaning. When that religious structure is eroded, language too is eroded, and semantics embarks on the sterile task of trying to salvage or analyze words rather than the religious, metaphysical, epistemological, and ethical task of establishing a new world of meaning. Gellius's antiquarianism and semanticism were thus different aspects of a single factor and were equally ineffectual. The Julian family law was, for similar reasons, mainly impotent with respect to Rome. It could not replace by law what had been removed by unbelief, cynicism, and relativism. The Augustan and Julian legal program was far more influential in subsequent Christian states than in Rome. The Christian family in the Roman Empire was clearly an alien institution. Living within a totalitarian unitary state, it moved in terms of a law which had no standing in Rome, God's law as revealed in the Old and New Testaments. Rome recognized various national traditions and legalized them as subordinate aspects of imperial law. Christian family life, however respectful of Roman law, moved clearly in terms of a law claiming priority to Rome and, indeed, granting tolerance by way of commanding obedience to it. Romans 13. Christians could defend their position as an obedient, law-abiding people, but their defense was obviously offensive. Rome claimed the right to establish the gods and religions, but the Christians obeyed because they declared their God had established Rome and commanded obedience to civil authorities. A more direct assault on the fundamental principle of Roman law is hard to imagine. Whether the God of the Christian commanded obedience or rebellion, the principle of the priority of his law and his right to ordain and to recognize was clearly treasonable, and many emperors felt that persecution for obliteration was necessary in order to remove this threat to their power and position. It is possible, too, that Lewinson's comment may have been true in its account of the Roman reaction. The moral teaching of the Christian missionaries sounded like a criticism of the private life of the imperial family, an attack on Roman law and on the morals of Roman society. The upper classes did not indeed let it worry them, but since this foreign sect won certain adherents among the proletariat, the police smelt a rat. Persons propagating and accepting such doctrines were capable of anything, even of deliberate subversion of the Roman Empire. The Inquisition, set on foot against the Christians after the burning of Rome in July AD 64, yielded no evidence that they had been responsible for the fire, but they were, as Tacitus reports, found guilty of hatred against humankind. This was ground enough for organizing a massacre of them. It should be noted that Tacitus suspected Nero of ordering the fire. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt on a class hated for their abominations called Christians by the populace. An immense multitude of the Christians was convicted not so much of the crime of firing the city as of hatred of mankind. The hatred of the Christians is apparent in Tacitus' paragraph, and their separateness is the ground of their offence as haters of humanity. The Christian concept of law, as revealed in its simple family life, made it clear that true Christians could not be assimilated into the empire.